Welcome back to Creative Excuses. Today we have a fresh 1-bar hybrid Necromancer just in time for spooky season. This is the Soul Harvester Necromancer, which is ready to play for either update 47 or update 48, because there were basically no changes. This is my first Magicka build in I don't even know how long, and it is very fun. It has the classic 3-ability cycle from the Necromancers of old, uses Soul Magic as well as Undead Magic, and tops out at 54k DPS on the 3 mil dummy, which is plenty for a 307,000 score in Vateshran Hollows. It is a very fun time, so let's jump into it. So just like my previous subclassing builds on my channel, we are not going to go over every detail of the setup. For that, you can pause the video here and look at the Superstar screenshot, or check out the written build in my Discord linked in the description. There is a forum posted in my server dedicated to this build where you can ask questions and get answers if you need them, or discuss the build with others. This setup is strong enough to clear Vateshran Hollows with a score around the 307,000 range. It can probably go a little bit faster though. This build is also capable of taking on Harrow Storms, Solo, Bastard Mimics, and lots of world bosses, but maybe not the highest incoming damage world bosses like in Gold Road, without some gear changes or some champion point swaps. It can also prove a very competent group damage dealer for 4-man content with enough cleave for trash and enough single target damage for bosses. Just make sure you always clear your 1-bar builds with your organized groups before you use them. Alrighty, so we aren't talking about every detail, but we do need to talk about the skill lines on this Soul Harvester Necromancer because they are important and they work really well together. Now, all 3 skill lines are super important this time, and I don't really see viable replacements without changing the build's feel dramatically or without changing its theme, or without reducing its performance significantly. If you are a sorcerer base class, you do have one additional option that the other 2 optional base classes don't have, in that you can use dark magic, but for the most part, use these 3 skill lines: Gravelord, Stormcalling, and Assassination. So first up, let's talk Gravelord. This is a pretty solid skill line in the world of subclassing because it has a really good stamina-based semi-spammable and some really strong passives. The semi-spammable is of course Blighted Blastbones, which hits like a truck and is a fairly predictable semi-spammable that forms the backbone of a Necromancer's rotation. This ability is what gives players the satisfying 1-2 Blastbones rotation that Necromancers are known for. And that's exactly how we're using Blastbones here. This really forms the core DPS identity of being a Necromancer, and that is really good because, like I said, it hits like a truck. In the parse here, you can see that this is hitting for an average of 32,000 damage over the course of the parse, and that's all area of effect damage. But that isn't all. Blighted Blastbones also is blighted, because it always inflicts the diseased condition, adding another 3.3k damage to each hit. Overall, this is hitting for 35,000 damage a cast, with a maximum of almost 47,000. Very nice, very spooky. The next skill we're making use of from the Gravelord skill line is Detonating Siphon in our flex slot. Detonating Siphon is a great ability for so many reasons. First, it is free to cast. All it requires is a corpse on the ground from your Blastbones exploding. It doesn't require Magicka or Stamina, which is super nice for a Magicka sustain especially. But it also deals very decent damage thanks to its detonation at the end of its duration, and its fast-ticking damage over time beam and area of effect. The combination of the explosion and the damage over time makes Detonating Siphon a very high damage per cast ability. In effect, because of the tether, you can get a very large area of damage from this ability, which if you're good at using, can help out in trash packs and boss fights quite a bit. But it is hard to use, especially on the run, and like I mentioned when I talked about power budgets in a previous video, difficulty to use usually means an ability gets some nice extra juice. In this case, that extra juice is a little bit extra damage, and a free 3% damage done passive just for having the ability slotted. Very nice, and very spooky again. Now, those are the only 2 direct Necromancer abilities that we're using, but there is an honorary one, and it's very important. It was actually the key to taking this build higher than my previous versions. Now don't worry, we're going to go back to the juicy Necro passives in a second. Our honorary Necromancer ability is Shocking Soul, a scribed version of the Wield Soul single target scribing ability, and this thing is fantastic for us, beyond being just a soul magic necromancy themed ability. You see, because we cast Blastbones so much, we don't actually need an insanely powerful spammable like Snipe with the Vateshran bow. Blastbones comes up so often and kind of fills that role for us, so we really just need a solid filler that pulls some heavy weight. This is where scribing comes in. Shocking Soul is pulling a ton of weight for us with 3 key features. First, It is a cheap spammable thanks to Druid's Resurgence as one of our scripts. This makes the ability refund us 600 magicka every time we use it, effectively making it only cost 1800 magicka instead of 2400. This also means that we get to use more pieces of medium armor, which are generally better than light armor, even for magicka-based builds like this one. The sustain from this really cannot be underestimated. Second, Shocking Soul is giving us our source of Major Breach, which is almost 6,000 penetration. It's super important to hit the penetration cap or close to it, which is 18,200 in most content that matters. And that 6,000 from Major Breach is the biggest individual source of it on pretty much any build. That Major Breach debuff is responsible for a ridiculous amount of our total damage, and we get it from our spammable, which is great. Third, and maybe most fun, Shocking Soul lets us easily use a soul magic themed monster set, the fairly new Black Gem Monstrosity monster set, which deals magic damage based on the enemy's maximum health. In PvE, this set is generally going to hit very, very hard because enemies have very high maximum health pools. You can see here it's hitting for an average of 46,000 damage and a maximum of 66,000 damage. It is dealing almost 14% of our total damage on its own, which is just wild. And using Shocking Soul makes this really easy to use while being thematic as hell. I love it. Back to the Gravelord passives. There are two really important ones for us, Death Knell and Dismember. Death Knell is awesome because it gives us a free passive execute. When an enemy is below 1/3 of their health remaining, we get a free 20% critical chance. This is part of why you see our crits so high on this parse. With this, our natural crit chance, and some buffs from the Assassination skill line, we're hitting around 79% crit chance during execute, which is absurdly good. Add in a little good luck, and your crits are going to be popping off all of the time. Dismember is just as important though, offering us an extra 3,200 penetration while either Blast Bones or Detonating Siphon is active. As long as one of those abilities are up, we're going to be getting much closer to that penetration cap, which is so important. The other two passives are good too, but we're only dealing 15% of our damage as damage over time, so that's a 1.5% damage increase at best. And the other one is for stamina sustain in this case, which Druid's Resurgence is covering 100% just from spamming Shocking Soul. Alrighty, that is Gravelord forming the skeleton of the build, but we have two more skill lines. Stormcalling is up next, and this skill is so good for one bar play. Let's talk about why. First, there are the passives which pull quite a lot of weight. We've got the Capacitor passive, which grants us a healthy amount of magicka, stamina, and health recovery, all of which are useful on our build, and all of which are a very reasonable amount. This is a super simple passive, but it helps us keep away from the sustained food, even with 3 pieces of medium armor on the build. We've also got Energized, which adds 5% damage to our Shocking Soul, our Lightning Staff light attacks, and our Unstable Wall of Storms, which is great. Technically, our glyph is also gaining some damage here, but that's pretty negligible. Stormcalling also comes with Amplitude, which provides a very nice bonus to our damage done at the beginning of a fight. This is a sort of reverse execute, which means that you can deal really solid burst damage to push a boss at the beginning of the fight, but your damage output will slowly drop over the course of the fight until we hit our Death Knell execute passive, so that we get very solid damage bonuses at the beginning of the fight and at the end of the fight. Amplitude and Death Knell really match up well together. Finally, we have the juiciest passive of them all, Expert Mage, which grants 108 weapon and spell damage per sorcerer skill slotted on your bar. This passive is super important because if you go all out, you can actually get up to 648 weapon and spell damage before buffs. Now, we're usually only going to use one sorcerer ability on the bar, so this is only 108 weapon and spell damage for us. But on the higher damage and even faster variant of this build, that's a little bit more sorcerer than Necromancer, this adds another 108 weapon and spell damage, contributing to the extra damage that we're going to get from Hurricane on that version. These passives combine to make a very nice offensive base for this build and for almost any build. But Stormcalling also brings one very important active ability for us as well, Critical Surge. Critical Surge is a classic ability that hasn't seen changes in absolutely ages. It's very good for solo play and for low healing groups, but it's not really that good in PvP, and it doesn't really do anything for high-end groups that they couldn't do otherwise, which is why it hasn't really seen any changes. It's just a solidly balanced skill. But it is so good for us. Once per second, when we deal critical damage, we're healed for 3,300 before criticals, which can bump this up to over 5,000 healing per second. This provides essentially all of the healing that we're going to need to use on this particular setup, and even though it deals no damage, it's worth using on basically any 1-bar build, with Stormcalling slotted as a skill line. Don't forget, this is also the skill that's giving us 108 weapon and spell damage just for sitting there. If you do need more healing, you can slot Reaving Blows, the champion point node, alongside this ability to get quite a lot more healing per second, but you will still lack a burst heal, of course. Bonus points to Stormcalling here though, you can replace Detonating Siphon with Hurricane to pick up another 1,000 to 2,000 damage per second and some extra movement speed for Vateshran. That would make this setup even better, but of course, Hurricane just makes the setup feel more like a sorcerer than a necromancer, and this is spooky season after all. Leave the costume on until the end of October, and then go sprint through Vateshran like you're made of the wind. Alright, finally we get the namesake of the build. Sort of. This is Assassination. I know, everyone uses this skill line, but it's just so good. But I actually wanted to use it here, not just because it's so good, but because of the name of this ultimate. Soul Harvest. In-cap strike would probably be a little bit better, but Soul Harvest is thematic and still very good. This ability lets us generate a bunch of ultimate with killing blows, which is cool, like we're harvesting their souls to feed our blast bones and our detonating siphons and whatever. But even more important, it's a cheap ultimate that gives us a very nice 20% damage buff for a few seconds when our semi-spammables and hopefully black gems pop off for some excellent damage. If you can time this really well with those two procs, you can get a lot of damage. But perhaps even more important than that, we're getting access to the juicy Assassination passive, Pressure Points, and Hemorrhage. Pressure Points gives us 2.5% critical chance, while Hemorrhage gives us another 6-ish% critical chance, and a free 10% critical damage. That's very, very good. We also get some free Magicka Sustain when we kill stuff, which is thematic and very nice because even with all of our sustain tools active, Magicka Sustain can still be a little tight every once in a while. Basically, all of this feels very thematic, it looks cool, and it makes some sense given you literally get your soul stolen by a kind of assassin in the game. It just feels a little Manny Marco-ish. I don't know, man. It also fits better than the Adric Spear skill line, and it's very close to it in damage. Adric Spear's ultimate would probably perform better in Vateshran though, because it can be used to great effect in trash pulls, but whatever. It's spooky season, use your budget Blades of Woe, and have mandatory fun time. With the skill lines taken care of, let's talk briefly about the sets, because they are also really important. The most important set is of course Tideborn, which increases our direct damage against monsters by 12%. Given that over 80% of our damage is direct damage, this is a great thing to have. It's also a multiplicative buff, which makes it really potent on this setup. Our other main set though, besides the monster set, which we already talked about, is the Maelstrom Lightning Staff, preferably the perfected version because we are making use of the penetration line on it. The Maelstrom Staff is doing two things for us. First, it makes the damage over time portion of Unstable Wall of Storms hit very hard. It basically doubles the damage of the damage over time section of the ability, which is awesome. Second, however, the boosted damage also applies to the explosion, turning Unstable Wall of Storms into a very solid AoE spammable, which is very good for clearing out trash without having to swap weapons or skills or anything like that. The neat part of this ability is that the damage over time portion hits at the same time that you cast the skill, so when you recast it to detonate the ability early, you get one tick of damage over time and the explosion, making it very comparable to a full-on AoE spammable for damage. It's great. We love a Maelstrom Staff build. Our last two sets are of course Oaken Soul and any 2-piece set that gives crit chance for its first bonus. And that's the build, everyone, but there is still so much more that goes into a build, like the food, the potions, the champion points, the armor weights, the armor traits, and of course, whatever end chance we have. Pause the video here to see all of that information on this superstar screen, but even better, check out my Discord server linked in the description where I have the full written guide with these parse screenshots and extra variants in case that you need a different monster set that only performs a little bit worse. I've got 2 more spooky season builds planned, a werewolf and a vampire, so get subscribed or join my Discord to be notified when I post those. Until next time, enjoy the rest of this Vateshran Hollows run, and I'll see you all in the next excuse.
stone den. Sorry about the heat. Ambition and destruction. Don't say it appreciate ambition. made it all the way to the end. Only one final challenge left. Me? Or... Ah! What? Oh, magic! I feel it. Tearing me apart!
Avoid, Mother. We did not summon such a creature for this challenge. Vateshran's rights now end. You did more than we expected. Well done.